I stood at the edge of the ballroom, the golden light from crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the crowd. But it did little to thaw the ice in my chest. 50 years. Half a century of shared mornings, whispered promises, and the kind of love that weathers storms I thought we'd conquered together. The room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, our children and grandchildren weaving through the guests, their smiles a testament to the life Richard and I had built. I adjusted the emerald silk of my gown, its weight anchoring me as I scanned the faces, searching for him. My husband. The man who'd held my hand through hospital rooms and midnight arguments, who'd kissed my forehead just last week and called me his forever. Tonight was supposed to be our triumph, a celebration of endurance, of us. But something in his absence, in the way he dodged my eyes all evening, gnawed at me like a splinter under skin. I'd felt it for months, his late nights, the vague excuses, the way his laughter no longer reached his eyes. I chalked it up to age, to the weariness of time. But now, standing here, I wasn't so sure. The band struck up a waltz, and I caught a glimpse of him across the room, his silver hair catching the light as he leaned close to a woman I didn't recognize. She was young, too young, her red dress clinging to her like a second skin, her laughter sharp and carefree. My heart stuttered, but I forced myself to breathe. I was Eleanor Mason, mother of 3, grandmother of 7, the woman who'd turned a crumbling farmhouse into a home and a failing business into an empire. I didn't crumble. Not yet. I moved through the crowd, my smile a practiced mask, greeting guests who gushed about our milestone. 50 years. Eleanor. How do you do it? They'd say, and I'd laugh, the sound hollow even to my own ears. How did we do it? I wasn't sure anymore. My daughter, Claire, caught my arm, her brow furrowed. Mom, you okay? You look distant. I squeezed her hand, the warmth of her touch grounding me. Just taking it all in, sweetheart. I lied. She nodded, but her eyes lingered, seeing too much, just like her father. I excused myself, my gaze drifting back to Richard. He was still with her, his hand grazing her arm, a gesture so intimate it felt like a blade. I wanted to march over, to demand answers, but something colder, sharper took root. I'd spent decades building this family, sacrificing dreams, swallowing pride. If Richard thought he could unravel it in one night, he was mistaken. I slipped my phone from my clutch, my fingers steady as I texted Margaret, my attorney. It's time. I wrote. Her reply was instant. I'm here. I didn't know what I'd find when I confronted him, but I knew one thing. I wasn't the only one with secrets tonight. The band slowed, and Richard's voice cut through the hum, loud and jovial, calling for attention. My pulse quickened as he climbed the small stage, the woman in red trailing behind him like a shadow. Friends. Family. He began, his smile wide. Tonight's not just about Eleanor and me. It's about love, about new beginnings. My stomach twisted as he gestured to her. I'd like you to meet Vanessa, someone very special. The room clapped, oblivious, but I felt the world tilt. 50 years, and he was introducing his girlfriend. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I stepped forward, my voice steady as I called out. And I'd like you to meet Margaret, my attorney. The crowd stilled, and Richard's smile faltered. Margaret appeared at my side, her briefcase a silent promise. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my revenge. The silence that followed my words was deafening. A vacuum swallowing the clatter of glasses and the murmur of voices. Richard's face, flushed with confidence moments ago, drained of color, his eyes darting between me and Margaret. Vanessa, the woman in red, froze, her hand hovering near his arm as if unsure whether to retreat or cling tighter. The crowd shifted, their curiosity a living thing, pressing against me. I stood taller, my emerald gown catching the light, a beacon of defiance. Margaret's presence beside me was a steady anchor, her calm professionalism a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in my chest. I'd known her for years, ever since she helped me save our family business from ruin in the 90s. She was more than an attorney. She was a confidant, a strategist. And tonight, my weapon. Richard cleared his throat, attempting to reclaim the room. Eleanor, darling, what's this about? His voice was smooth, but I caught the tremor, the crack in his facade. Darling. The word tasted like ash. I stepped closer to the stage, my heels clicking against the polished floor, each step a declaration. Oh, Richard, I said, my voice carrying a sweetness laced with venom. I thought we were sharing surprises tonight. You introduced Vanessa. I introduced Margaret. Fair, don't you think? A nervous chuckle rippled through the guests. But my children, Claire, Michael, and Sarah stood frozen, their faces a mix of shock and dawning realization. Claire's hand tightened on her husband's arm, her eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't ready to give. Not yet. Richard's smile twitched, but he pressed on, ever the charmer. Let's not make a scene, love. This is our night. Our night. The audacity of it burned. But I kept my gaze steady, locking eyes with him. It is our night. I agreed. And I intend to make it unforgettable. I turned to Margaret, who nodded slightly, her expression unreadable but her posture radiating readiness. She stepped forward, her voice clear and measured. Mr. Mason, I'm here to discuss certain discrepancies in your financial and personal conduct over the past 2 years. Mrs. Mason has concerns that warrant immediate attention. The crowd gasped, whispers erupting like wildfire. Richard's jaw tightened, and Vanessa took a step back, her confidence crumbling. I felt a pang of something pity, perhaps, but it was fleeting, drowned by the weight of his betrayal. 50 years of marriage, of shared dreams and sacrifices, and he thought he could rewrite our story with her. I'd spent months piecing together the Truth Bank statements showing withdrawals to accounts I didn't recognize. Late-night calls he brushed off. Hotel receipts tucked carelessly in his coat. I'd hired a private investigator, not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. And the photos of him with Vanessa had seared themselves into my memory. But this wasn't just about hurt. It was about justice. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Tonight, we celebrate 50 years of family, of loyalty. But loyalty is earned, not assumed. And when it's broken, there are consequences. Richard's eyes widened, a flicker of fear betraying his composure. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand, silencing him. You'll have your chance to explain, Richard. But not here. Not now. I nodded to Margaret, who opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. This, she said, addressing the room but looking at Richard, is a formal notice. We'll be discussing asset division, among other things. The words landed like a gavel, and I saw the moment Richard realized he wasn't in control. Vanessa whispered something to him, her face pale, but he shook her off, his focus on me. For the first time in months, I felt powerful. Not the fading wife he'd taken for granted, but Eleanor Mason, the woman who'd built a life from nothing and would do it again if needed. The band, sensing the tension, struck up a soft melody, and the crowd began to disperse, murmuring. My children approached, their faces a mix of anger and confusion. But I held up a hand. Later, I said softly, we'll talk later. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded. As I turned to leave the stage, Richard called after me. Eleanor, please, let's talk. I paused, my back to him, and for a moment, I remembered the boy I'd married, the one who danced with me under the stars. But that boy was gone, buried under years of choices I couldn't forgive. Not yet. We'll talk, Richard, I said without turning, with Margaret present. And with that, I walked away, my heart pounding but my resolve unbroken. The air outside the ballroom felt cooler, sharper, as if the world beyond those gilded doors knew the storm I carried inside. I stepped onto the terrace, the night wrapping around me like a cloak, the distant hum of the city blending with the faint music drifting from inside. Margaret followed, her heels a soft echo behind me, but she gave me space, sensing my need for a moment to breathe. I gripped the stone railing, my knuckles whitening as I stared out at the skyline, the lights blurring through the tears I refused to let fall. 50 years. I'd given Richard everything me youth. My dreams. My trust. I'd raised our children, balanced his ambitions with my own, and turned our struggles into triumphs. And yet, here I was, on what should have been our golden night, plotting my revenge. Not the reckless kind, born of rage, but a calculated justice, forged in the quiet hours of betrayal's aftermath. Margaret's voice broke my thoughts, gentle but firm. Eleanor, we don't have to do this tonight. We can serve the papers tomorrow. Privately. I shook my head, my lips pressing into a thin line. No. He made this public. He brought her here, to our anniversary, in front of our family. He doesn't get to hide now. She nodded, her eyes reflecting a quiet respect. Margaret had seen me at my lowest, when the business nearly collapsed and creditors circled like vultures. She'd fought for me then, and she was fighting for me now. But this wasn't just about money or assets. This was about reclaiming my dignity, my story. I turned back to the ballroom, catching sight of Richard through the glass doors, surrounded by our children, his hands gesturing wildly as he tried to explain. Claire's face was a mask of hurt, Michael's jaw set in anger, and Sarah, ever the peacemaker, looked torn, her hands clasped tightly. They deserved the truth, but not the spectacle Richard had turned this into. I protect them, even if it meant breaking their hearts first. Margaret touched my arm. The investigator's report is airtight. Bank records, emails, even hotel surveillance. He won't have much room to maneuver. I nodded, the weight of her words settling over me. I'd hired the investigator 6 months ago, after finding a lipstick-stained napkin in Richard's car. The shade a garish red that wasn't mine. I told myself it was nothing, but the doubts grew, each one a pebble in a pile that eventually buried my trust. The report had confirmed it. Vanessa, a marketing consultant half his age, had been his secret for nearly 2 years. They'd met at a conference, her ambition matching his ego, and what started as flirtation became an affair that drained our accounts and my heart. But I wasn't the only one he'd betrayed. Our business, the one we'd built together, was bleeding money, funneled into gifts and trips for her. I'd spent sleepless nights poring over the numbers, ensuring our employees' our extended family wouldn't suffer for his selfishness. Now, I'd used that same precision to dismantle his lies. I straightened, smoothing my gown, and met Margaret's gaze. Let's go back in. I need to speak to the children. She nodded, and we re-entered the ballroom, the atmosphere heavier now, the guests' whispers a low hum. Richard was still with the children, but Vanessa was gone, likely slinking away from the scrutiny. Good. I approached, my presence drawing their eyes. Claire rushed to me, her voice breaking. Mom, what's happening? Dad says it's a misunderstanding. Michael's voice was colder, cutting through. It's not, is it? I saw the way he looked at her. Sarah stayed silent, her eyes pleading for something to hold on to. I took a breath, steadying myself. Your father made choices that hurt this family. I've known for months, and I've been preparing. Margaret is here to protect user legacy, our future. Claire's tears spilled over, and I pulled her into my arms, feeling her tremble. Michael's fists clenched, but he nodded, his loyalty shifting to me. Sarah hesitated, then took my hand. What do we do now, Mom? She whispered. I looked at them, my heart swelling with love and resolve. We stand together, I said, and we fight for what's ours. Richard watched us, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. I met his gaze, not as his wife, but as his equal, his adversary. The night wasn't over, and neither was my plan. I'd spent 50 years building this family. I'd spend whatever time I had left ensuring it endured. The ballroom felt smaller now, the walls closing in as the weight of truth pressed against us all. I stood with my children, their hands in mine, a fragile circle of strength amid the chaos Richard had unleashed. His eyes followed me, searching for a crack in my resolve. But I gave him none. I'd spent months preparing for this moment, building a case as meticulously as I'd once built our home. Every receipt, every email, every late-night drive he thought I hadn't noticed said it was all cataloged. A ledger of betrayal. Margaret stood nearby, her briefcase a silent sentinel, its contents a map to our future without him. I turned to Claire, Michael, and Sarah, their faces a kaleidoscope of emotions: hurt, anger, confusion. Let's go somewhere private, I said softly, guiding them toward a side room off the ballroom. The guests parted for us, their whispers trailing like smoke. Richard followed, his steps hesitant, as if he knew the ground beneath him was crumbling. The side room was quieter, its soft lighting a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I closed the door, shutting out the world, and faced my family. Richard stood by the window, his back to us, as if he could escape the reckoning by staring at the city lights. Claire spoke first, her voice trembling but fierce. Dad, how could you? 50 years. And you do this? Michael's anger was quieter, more dangerous. Do you even care what this does to us? To Mom. Sarah, always the bridge between us, reached for Richard's arm. But he flinched, and her hand fell. I let them speak, let their pain fill the room, because they deserved to be heard. But I was done waiting for his excuses. Richard, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. You don't get to stand there and pretend this is a misunderstanding. I know everything. The accounts. The trips. Vanessa. His shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn. Eleanor, it's not what you think. He began, his voice low, rehearsed. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that startled even me. Not what I think. I have bank statements showing transfers to her account. Photos of you together in Paris, in New York. Hotel rooms booked under aliases. You thought I was too old, too trusting to notice. He turned then, his face a mix of guilt and defiance. You've been spying on me. The audacity of his indignation lit a fire in me. You made it necessary. I shot back. You betrayed Yuzel of us. Our children. Our grandchildren. Our legacy. Claire sobbed softly, and Michael stepped closer to her, his arm around her shoulders. Sarah's eyes were wide, torn between her father and the truth. I softened my tone, addressing them. I didn't want this to be public, but your father chose this stage. I've spent months protecting what we've built, ensuring the business stays stable, that your futures are secure. Margaret has everything we need to make this right. Richard's voice was hoarse now, pleading. Eleanor, we can work this out. For the kids. For the family. I met his gaze, seeing the man I'd loved for decades, but also the stranger he'd become. The family, I said, is why I'm doing this. You broke us, Richard. Now I'm putting us back together. Margaret stepped forward, her voice calm but unyielding. Mr. Mason, the evidence suggests significant financial misconduct, alongside personal breaches of trust. We're prepared to file for divorce and pursue a full audit of your accounts. His face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the weight of his choices settle on him. But I felt no pity, only resolve. I turned to my children. This isn't the end of our family. It's a new beginning. We'll rebuild. Together. Claire nodded, wiping her tears. Michael's jaw unclenched, his eyes softening as he looked at me. Sarah hesitated, then stepped closer, her hand finding mine. Richard's voice broke the silence. A whisper now. Eleanor, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Sorry was a word, not a remedy. I nodded to Margaret, who opened the door, signaling it was time to return to the ballroom. The night wasn't over, but the tide had turned. I'd spent 50 years building this family, and I'd spend the rest of my life ensuring it stood strong. With or without him. The ballroom was a different world when we returned. The festive air replaced by a hushed tension, like the calm before a storm breaks. Guests glanced at us, their eyes darting away when I met their gaze. But I held my head high, my emerald gown a banner of resilience. My children flanked me, their presence a shield and a reminder of what I was fighting for. Richard trailed behind, his confidence eroded, his steps heavy with the weight of exposure. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen, likely fled from the wreckage of her spotlight moment. I didn't care where she'd gone. She was a symptom, not the disease. Margaret stayed close, her briefcase a quiet promise of justice, its contents a map to dismantling Richard's carefully constructed lies. I caught sight of my grandchildren across the room, their laughter subdued, their eyes searching for answers I wasn't ready to give. Not yet. I turned to Claire, Michael, and Sarah, my voice low but firm. Stay with the kids. Keep them grounded. I'll handle this. Claire's eyes glistened, but she nodded, her strength mirroring mine. Michael squeezed my shoulder, a silent vow of support. Sarah hesitated, her loyalty torn, but she joined her siblings, her steps reluctant. I faced the crowd, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. The band had stopped, the silence amplifying every whisper, every shift of fabric. I stepped onto the stage, Margaret at my side, and cleared my throat. Thank you all for being here to celebrate 50 years of our family. I began, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. This night was meant to honor love, loyalty, and endurance. But tonight, I've learned that not all vows hold. The crowd stilled, their attention a weight I bore willingly. Richard stood at the edge of the stage, his face pale, his hands clenched. I continued, each word a stone in the wall I was building. I've spent decades building this family, this business, this life. I poured my heart into it, and I won't let it be torn apart by betrayal. A murmur rippled through the room, but I pressed on. My attorney, Margaret, is here to ensure justice for me, for my children, for the legacy we've created. This isn't the end of our story. It's a new chapter. I glanced at Richard, his eyes pleading, but I felt no softness, only clarity. I'd loved him once, fiercely, but love didn't excuse deceit. Margaret stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. We'll be addressing legal matters in the coming days, including financial discrepancies and asset division. This family's foundation will remain strong. The crowd's whispers grew, but I ignored them, stepping down from the stage. Richard approached, his voice low, desperate. Eleanor, please, let's talk. Just us. I met his gaze, seeing the man I'd married but also the stranger he'd become. There's nothing to say that Margaret can't hear. I said. You made your choices, Richard. Now I'm making mine. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the gesture final. I walked toward my children, who were gathered with the grandchildren, their faces a mix of worry and pride. Claire hugged me, her voice a whisper. "I'm so proud of you, Mom." Michael nodded, his eyes fierce. "We've got your back." Sarah's gaze lingered on her father, but she stayed by my side, her silence a choice. The night wore on, the guests drifting away, their congratulations replaced by awkward goodbyes. I stayed until the end, ensuring every detail was handled, every memory preserved for the family that remained. As the last guest left, I stood alone in the ballroom, the chandeliers dimmed, the echoes of laughter gone. Margaret joined me, her presence a quiet strength. "You did well, Eleanor," she said. "This is just the beginning." I nodded, my eyes on the empty stage. "I know. And I'm ready." 50 years had taught me endurance. But tonight had taught me something new. I was more than the sum of my sacrifices. I was a force, and I would reclaim what was mine, starting with myself. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, documents, and quiet moments where the weight of my new reality settled in. I moved through our home, our sprawling farmhouse turned sanctuary with a strange detachment, as if the walls themselves held memories I could no longer trust. Richard had moved to the guest house at my insistence, his belongings packed in boxes that sat like accusations in the hallway. I didn't touch them. Let him face his own wreckage. Margaret's office became my second home, a sterile space of glass and steel where we dissected 50 years of shared assets and secrets. The investigator's report was a grim tapestry, weaving together Richard's affair with financial betrayal. He'd siphoned funds from our business, funneling them into accounts tied to Vanessa, funding her lavish lifestyle while our employees faced delayed bonuses. The numbers were staggering, but the betrayal cut deeper. I trusted him with our legacy, and he'd gambled it for her. My children rallied around me, their support a lifeline. Claire took charge of the grandchildren, shielding them from the worst of the whispers. Michael dove into the business, auditing accounts with a ferocity that mirrored my own. Sarah struggled, her loyalty to her father a lingering thread. But she came to every meeting, her presence a quiet promise. One evening, as we sat around the dining table, the same table where we'd celebrated birthdays and weathered crises, Claire broke the silence. "Mom, how are you holding up?" Her eyes searched mine, seeing past the facade I'd perfected. I set down my coffee, the warmth of the mug grounding me. "I'm angry," I admitted, the words raw. "But I'm not broken. Not anymore." Michael leaned forward, his voice steady. "We're going to fix this, Mom. The business, the family, everything." Sarah reached for my hand, her touch tentative. "I just want us to be okay," she whispered. I squeezed her hand, my heart aching but resolute. "We will be," I said. "But it starts with truth." The truth was ugly, but it was mine to wield. Margaret had filed for divorce, citing infidelity and financial misconduct, and the audit was uncovering more than I'd expected: offshore accounts, hidden debts, a web of deceit that threatened everything we'd built. But I wasn't fighting just for money. I was fighting for my children's future, for the grandchildren who deserved a legacy untainted by their grandfather's choices. Richard called daily, his voicemails a mix of apologies and defensiveness. But I didn't answer. Not yet. I needed space to rebuild. To find the woman I'd been before I became his wife. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden, the roses I'd planted decades ago blooming defiantly, Margaret arrived with news. "Vanessa's gone," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "Left the city. Richard's accounts tied to her are frozen. Pending investigation." I nodded, the roses scent grounding me. "And Richard?" I asked. "He's cooperating," she said. "But he's scared. He knows what's at stake." I looked at the roses, their thorns a reminder that beauty could protect itself. "Good," I said. "Let him feel it." That night, I sat with the grandchildren, reading stories as they nestled against me. Their laughter was a balm, a reminder of why I fought. But as I tucked them in, I saw Richard's eyes in their faces, and the ache returned. I wanted to hate him, but love was a stubborn thing, tangled in 50 years of shared history. I didn't know if I could forgive him, but I knew I could survive him. The next morning, Margaret called me to her office. "We've found something," she said, her voice tight. "An account in your name, but you never signed for it." My heart sank as she showed me the documents millions diverted, hidden under my name to avoid taxes. Richard's signature was scrawled across them, a betrayal deeper than I'd imagined. I felt the ground shift, but I didn't falter. "File it," I said. "All of it." Margaret nodded, her eyes fierce. "This changes everything, Eleanor. He's not just fighting for assets now. He's fighting for his freedom." I looked out her window, the city sprawling below, and felt a spark of something new, not just revenge, but redemption. I wasn't just tearing down his lies. I was building something stronger in their place. The revelation of the account in my name was a blow I hadn't seen coming, a final twist of the knife Richard had wielded so carelessly. I sat in Margaret's office, the documents spread before me like a map of his deceit, each signature a testament to how far he'd fallen. He'd used my name, my trust, to hide his crimes, thinking I'd never look closely enough to see. But I had, and now the game had changed. This wasn't just about divorce or assets anymore. It was about accountability, about ensuring he faced the consequences of his choices. I leaned back in the chair, my hands steady despite the storm inside. "What's our next step?" I asked Margaret, my voice calm but edged with steel. She adjusted her glasses, her expression grim but determined. "We turn this over to the authorities. Fraud, tax evasion, these are criminal charges. He could face prison." The word hung between us, heavy and final. Prison. I'd loved this man, built a life with him, and now I was dismantling it piece by piece. But he'd left me no choice. I nodded. "Do it." The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal filings and hushed conversations. My children were furious, their trust in their father shattered. Claire threw herself into protecting the business, working late to stabilize our accounts. Michael met with our employees, assuring them their jobs were safe. Sarah, still torn, began to distance herself from Richard, her silence louder than words. I focused on the grandchildren, shielding them from the worst, but their questions cut deep. "Why is Grandpa gone?" little Emma asked one night, her eyes wide. I hugged her close. My voice soft. Grandpa made some mistakes. Sweetheart. But we're still a family. The truth was too heavy for her, but I carried it for us all. Richard's call stopped, replaced by a single letter, delivered to the house by courier. I opened it alone in my study, the familiar scrawl of his handwriting a punch to the gut. Eleanor. It began. I know I've lost you, but I need you to understand. I was weak, selfish, but I never meant to hurt you or the kids. Vanessa was a mistake, a distraction from the pressure I felt. The accounts. I thought I was protecting us. I'm sorry. Let me make this right. I read it twice, searching for the man I'd known. But all I saw was desperation. Excuses dressed as remorse. I folded the letter and tucked it away, not ready to respond but unwilling to discard it. Part of me wanted to believe he could change, but trust was a bridge he'd burned. Margaret called me to court a week later, a preliminary hearing to address the fraud charges. Richard sat across the room, his suit immaculate but his face haggard, the weight of his choices etched in every line. He met my gaze, his eyes pleading, but I looked away, focusing on Margaret as she presented the evidence. The judge's voice was a distant hum, but the outcome was clear. Richard would face trial, his assets frozen, his freedom in limbo. As we left the courtroom, he approached me, his voice low. Eleanor, please. I'll do anything. I stopped, my heart a battleground of love and rage. You had 50 years to do the right thing, I said. You chose this. I walked away, my children waiting outside, their faces a mirror of my resolve. That night, I sat in the garden, the roses glowing under the moonlight. I thought of the girl I'd been when I met Richard, full of dreams and trust. She was still in me, but she was stronger now, tempered by loss and forged in fire. I wasn't just seeking revenge. I was seeking redemption for myself, for my family, for the life we deserved. The road ahead was long, but I was ready. I spent 50 years building a family. Now, I'd spend the rest ensuring it thrived, no matter the cost. The months that followed were a crucible, each day a step toward rebuilding what Richard had fractured. The trial loomed, a shadow over our family, but I refused to let it define us. I poured myself into the business, working alongside Michael to secure new contracts, ensuring our employees felt valued and safe. Claire became my rock, organizing family dinners where laughter slowly returned. The grandchildren's joy a reminder of what we were fighting for. Sarah began to heal, her visits to Richard less frequent, her loyalty shifting to the family we were rebuilding. I saw glimpses of redemption in her eyes, a quiet strength she'd inherited from me. The house felt different without Richard, quieter but not empty. I redecorated, replacing old photos with new ones. Me children, my grandchildren, moments of joy that didn't include him. But his letter stayed in my desk, a weight I couldn't ignore. Late at night, I'd reread it, searching for sincerity, for a reason to believe he could change. But trust was a fragile thing, and he'd shattered it too thoroughly. Margaret kept me grounded, her updates a steady drumbeat of progress. The fraud charges were airtight, the evidence overwhelming. Richard's lawyers pushed for a plea deal, but I left that to the courts. My focus was on protecting our legacy, ensuring the business and our family's future were secure. One evening, as I sat with Claire in the kitchen, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Mom, do you think you'll ever forgive him?" I stirred my tea, the steam curling like memories. "I don't know," I admitted. "I loved him for so long. But love isn't enough without trust. Maybe forgiveness comes later, when I've rebuilt what he broke." She nodded, her hand finding mine, and in that moment, I felt the strength of our bond, unbreakable despite the pain. The trial came, a cold morning in spring, the courtroom packed with reporters and curious onlookers. I sat in the front row, my children beside me, Margaret a steady presence. Richard took the stand, his voice trembling as he admitted his guilt, infidelity, fraud, all of it. He looked at me, his eyes raw with regret, and spoke directly to me. "Eleanor, I failed you. I failed our family. I'll spend the rest of my life making it right, if you'll let me." The room was silent, every eye on me, but I didn't flinch. His words were heavy, but they couldn't undo the past. The judge sentenced him to 3 years, with parole possible if he cooperated fully. As he was led away, he looked back, and I held his gaze, not with anger, but with resolve. I wasn't the woman he'd betrayed anymore. I was Eleanor Mason, and I was enough. The months after the trial were a rebirth. The business thrived. Our family grew closer, and I found joy in small moments, gardening with Emma, laughing with Claire, watching Michael mentor his son. I began to write, pouring my story into a journal, not for revenge, but for healing. One day, Sarah brought me a letter from Richard, written from prison. "I'm working on myself," he wrote. "Not for you, but because you showed me what strength looks like. I hope one day you'll see it in me." I set it aside, not ready to respond, but I didn't burn it. Redemption was a long road, for both of us. On the anniversary of that fateful night, I stood in the garden, the roses blooming brighter than ever. My family gathered around me, their laughter a symphony of hope. I'd spent 50 years building a life with Richard, but now I was building one for myself. Justice had been served, not in his punishment, but in my freedom. I looked at the stars, the same ones we danced under decades ago, and smiled. I was whole, and that was my victory.